Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, Chris Tobin is with me. We're talking about how do you do things? How do you, for example, mic and mix a live performance group in your studio? And can you do that in radio studios that aren't really meant for it? Plus, we're talking about the future of PC platforms in radio stations. Are we headed there? Really? Our show, This Week in Radio Tech, is brought to you by the Telos Alliance and the new Omnia Volt audio processor. More processing power in one rack unit than others give you in 3. By BSW Broadcast Supply Worldwide, where the remote sale is on. Save on headsets and remote packages at bswusa.com. And by Lavo, providing seamless integration of your work processes and the uncomplicated operation of complex technology. See Lavo in your future at lavo.com/TWiRT. Hey, welcome in. It's time for This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. Delighted that you're here. Love doing the show every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Pacific, and all sorts of times in between. Hey, tell your friends about it if you would. I'd really appreciate it. Also, patronize our sponsors. We have 3 sponsors now on the show. We worked for a long time to build up to 3 sponsors, and if you would pay attention to their ads and check them out a little bit, that would be just delightful. Really appreciate it. All right, it is our 355th episode. So we're going to take the opportunity, Chris Tobin and I, to talk about some subjects in depth that we want to explore a little bit. And a couple of one of these, I should say, the title of the show is The Way We Do Things. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we do some things now, a little bit of an unusual thing that I guess some engineers get to participate with, but others don't. And then we're going to talk about some future stuff about the way we do things. Are they scary, or are they not scary? Can we do them? Can we rely on them? And so we'll be. I know I'm not making a lot of sense here, but we'll bring it all up. Let's bring in Chris Tobin, who always makes perfect sense. He's right here with us. Hey, Chris, welcome in.
Hello, Kirk. Hello, everyone. Yes, I do my best to make sense of everything. Common sense. Who would have thought? It's back in vogue, or maybe not.
All right. So where are you today?
I'm in a news booth, a news production booth at the jazz radio station here in New Jersey, the place I work at. Yep. Just hanging out. Decided not to be on a rooftop today. It's actually raining outside, so think it was a good choice.
You've got a pretty classic setup there with a classic console. Looks like, is it an analog console?
Absolutely. Radio Mixer 28, a PRD classic.
Ah, okay. Could last another 20 years.
Absolutely. It's already 20 plus. It's
amazing. I know.
It's amazing.
Is there, in that particular booth, is there anything unusual about the way that you produce news? Or maybe I should ask the question, and this is kind of getting into the way we do things. We'll hit our first sponsor message in just a minute. But is the way you do news there somewhat dictated by looks like honestly about a 1990s, early 2000s room there? Or I guess what I'm asking is, if you had all new stuff, would the workflow be different?
Not really, because the workflow currently is all done on the computer behind me, which is a Mac Mini running Pro Tools.
Ah, okay.
So all the recordings, interviews go directly into that. The console just to my left or to your right is just basically a mixing console, just for monitoring stuff. Everything goes directly into Pro Tools. The recorders are solid-state recording devices, Marantz model. So take the little card out, pop it into the SD slot, transfer the files digitally. Never turns analog until you hear it on the radio.
Wow. So that seems to be the case quite a bit. I see more and more, when I was visiting a lot of radio stations, I would see more rooms that were falling into disuse, except they were very expensive speaker and monitor systems. And of course, go ahead.
It is. You could consider a very expensive speaker or monitor system, but the room is acoustically ideal for what they're trying to do. So let's not forget that when you're mixing, editing, or doing any work with audio, you need a room that's not too lively. It's somewhat dead, so you get everything you need, because you may have made a recording in a noisy city hall press room, and at the time didn't realize somebody was screaming next to you until you get back to your booth and go, oh, this is not going to work. Where if you did it in a cubicle in an office space or the classic warehouse design studio spaces these days, you probably wouldn't notice it until it goes to air, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, that wasn't a good idea. And trust me, I say this because I have been in many a facility and heard many a broadcast where that happened, and I was like, I don't think they auditioned that cut. That soundbite, I think I know what the guy was trying to say, but there was too much ambient noise around him. Just keep that in mind.
So Chris, just to preview the rest of the show as we roll into our first sponsor message, I thought we'd do a couple of things today. One, talk about the way we do things now, and I'd like to cover this subject that you have some insight on, and most of the rest of us engineers really don't, and that is recording of groups, musical instruments, singers, whatever it may be, at your facility, in a facility that may or may not have actually been designed to be a recording studio per se. Plenty of public radio stations did have some of that design in place when they were built or remodeled, but most commercial stations do not. I know there's a few that have that. So I'd like you to talk about mic technique, mixing technique, what you can do with broadcast style gear, if that's what you're using, to mix a live performance or a performance to tape. So I'd like to understand the way we do things now in this, because this is a skill that I'd love to think that I have, and I don't. I don't know what, if a group came in, I might kind of get them mic'd right, but I'm sure I'd make 1,000 mistakes. Luckily, it'd probably come out okay on the air, but I'd like to know some of the nuances of what you learn about this technique and or this realm of engineering. And then after that, we're going to look into the subject of equipment, appliance versus PC based. And we have some interesting thoughts on that because, PC motherboards have been creeping into the things that we use every day more and more. And you just pointed out that in that room, not a whole lot of the specifically engineered gear gets used anymore. You're using a Mac Mini for a lot of the stuff, and a couple of Marantz recorders, which are designed for that. So we'll cover that. I think it's going to be a pretty fascinating talk because we're going to get into. See, here's the decision I'm facing. When's the right time to jump into running FM audio processors on a PC, and what kind of backup do I need for that? So that's the end goal of the conversation. Are we at that point yet? Because there's stations here in Nashville that are doing that. I'm a little nervous. We'll talk about that. Our show This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by my friends at the Telos Alliance, well, my employer too. And the Omnia division has this brand new audio processor, the Omnia Volt. And it's not a PC, it's an appliance. So I'm real comfortable. Let's take a look at this little message about the Omnia Volt.
More top radio stations choose Omnia than all other competing processors combined. Now meet the Omnia Volt, sharing lineage with Omnia processors like the Omnia 11, electrifying, competitive, market-leading audio in a compact one-rack unit package. With Omnia heritage built in, the Omnia Volt includes Dynamics Magic from Omnia chief algorithm designer Cornelius Gould, including 6 AGC sections from start to finish, deep bass, warmth, and stereo enhancers, 5-band time-aligned limiter, the world's best presets to get you started right, and spectrally pristine final processing designed by Frank Foti. Omnia Volt users love its Quick Tweak feature. Quick Tweak distills years of processing knowledge and proven approaches into simple controls that turn you into a processing pro. Nail your signature sound in minutes using advanced presets or your own settings right from the Volt's front panel or a PC. Omnia Volt brings charisma to your station's audio. FM translators and low-power FM stand out among the crowd. AM stations maximize clarity and coverage. Digital broadcasts sound clear and musical without fatiguing artifacts. Smart design, clearly visible outside and inside. Input and output connections in analog, AES-3, Livewire, and multiplex for FM. Automatic input selection handles redundant STLs. Remote control works with today's browsers, tablets, and smartphones. Idealized patch point for external watermarking. And hardened construction to withstand lightning strikes, surges, high RF fields, and harsh conditions.
The new Omnia Volt is stunning. Everyone will know you've got an Omnia on your station.
Omnia Volt is versatile too. DSP Core firmware alters the personality of Volt to fit your changing needs. FM, AM, digital transmission, or studio processing. Volt can even be used as a standalone stereo generator. DSP cores aren't extra cost add-ons. Download the functionality you need for free. The Omnia Volt. Omnia audio processing for any station, and a smart upgrade for aspiring broadcasters. Proven audio processing that'll leave your competitors in the dust.
what an amazing box. A great successor to the Omnia One with all new algorithms inside. Just terrific. Thanks, Omnia, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. And check out your Omnia Volt today. The price is amazingly low, and the performance is just incredibly high. All right. This Week in Radio Tech, we're talking about the way we do things. And Chris, I want to know about recording groups, microphones, preamps, how you set a mix. What do you have to do once you set them? Do you have to sit there and ride levels? I just don't know about all this stuff, and it's basic to a lot of people and a little bit of a mystery to me.
Well, yes, you do ride levels. You do need to understand different microphones and microphone techniques. There's a lot of things that go on in recording a group, whether it be jazz or rock and roll. I worked at a rock station, AOR format, whatever you want to call it, and we had many a group come through, like Squeeze and U2 and others, and it was interesting. And then I'm doing work with jazz artists and mixing a group for a final mix, a 2 mix for stereo or 5.1, depending on what you're doing. But in this case, it's a 2 mix. It takes experience, lots of hard work, understanding. It takes time. You don't pick this up overnight. For some, you have it. It's like a knack. If you have the knack, then you can do it. And for others to learn, it's very difficult. Understanding different instruments, say for the instance, a saxophone. It's a wind instrument, it's a horn, has a lot of energy coming out of that funnel, and certain microphones just are not suitable for that. So here we use Neumann TLM, was it 160s? Is that right? 160, 106s and 107s, and we have several other types that we use. And we have ribbon, we have dynamic, and you have to understand where to apply them and what's the best type to use. And then the positioning of the microphone to the instrument. Today we recorded saxophone, flute, bass, and we had drums. So the drums, you have hi-hats, right? You got the tops, the cymbals. Those get mic'd a certain way and a certain distance. And then you have the snare drum that gets mic'd very closely, so you get the real snap. Then there's the kick drum. Kick drum has a lot of energy, low frequency energy, so it's pushing a lot of air. And these are things you have to sort of understand. It's almost like understanding the physics of sound, the physics of materials. So you have a drum skin, and drum skin expands and contracts. You press against it. It pushes air out of a cylinder, out of a container. It creates sound. Well, that air gets pushed somewhere against the microphone element. So that you have choice of dynamic or electric or condenser, that is, and understanding how that handles it. So, understanding sound pressure level. Can the microphone handle 102 dB of sound pressure level? Or it can't. If it can't, then you're probably not going to use it on a kick drum. That's why a lot of times folks will use an RE20 or an SM7 on a kick drum, because it's designed to handle that blast. It can maintain the integrity of the audio waveform. Or you can use a condenser mic that's designed for that as well. But so going into this, you have to understand all these things.
Yeah. If you're recording essentially an acoustic group, like a jazz trio, quartet, quintet, you've got, I guess, mostly acoustic instruments there, right? Do you have any electric instruments in a group like that?
Well, you can have electric. The bass has an electric pickup, so you could choose to mic it acoustically, or you can use electric pickup. That's the bass amplifier. You have choice there. There's a guitar. Earlier in the week, we had someone playing guitar. Actually, Friday, we did a jam session Friday night, a 4-hour jam session, and the guitar was electric. So we mic the amplifier that the guitar plays out of.
Well, why isn't that taken direct? Why is a mic pointed at the speaker that the electric guitar is feeding?
Well, that's what I'm saying. The amp, the speaker amp, the guitar amp. That's what we do. We mic the amp.
Right.
There's various ways.
Why isn't I've always seen that on stage. I've seen mics in front of Marshall amps and such. Why do it that way instead of pick it off directly? Is it just easier from a ground loop point of view? Is it better that way, or is there a sound that we're looking for?
There are pickups you can get directly from the mic, from the guitar itself, the instrument. But a lot of times you use the speaker, because the speaker is the end product of what the artist is using. It may the guitar. If it's electric guitar, you have various effects, various ways of producing sound. So the end result is the speaker, both the artist, the player, and you hear the end result. That's part of what it is. When it comes to music and recording, it's not just the physics, the physical being of the music. It's how the artist plays the instrument, how that artist can bring out the sound. So sometimes electronic pickups are the way to do it. Other times it's purely acoustic, which would be at the speaker or the bellows of a bass, the little cutouts that you see, or an acoustic guitar. You point toward the opening, or and there's various ways to do it. And many times it's never the same technique twice. So you could have a sextet come in 3 days in a row, 3 different bands, and you mic them probably 3 different ways because it depends on how they play. Like Friday night when we had the drummer, the drummer played so hard. I mean, it was like the sticks were practically snapping in half. The amount of energy coming out of the drum set was huge. It was loud. So that technique there, you have to understand how to work it. And then we had a piano player. This guy was like, he's like 18 years old. This kid, it was unbelievable because it was just amazing. Hit those keys, and the miking of the piano, you have the low frequency strings, and you have the high frequency strings. You have 2 microphones in the piano, on the frame, in the frame. Mm-hmm. So positioning them in a certain way so you get the entire sound of the striking of the keys and the pressure. And then what else we have? We had vocalists. We had 2 vocalists. So the singers, they sang into a condenser mic, and there's a lot of things that it's very it can be very fluid at times, and it requires some real thinking. But when you do it right and you understand it, boy, I'll tell you, the end product, the results, it's great. What we've been doing here though is now we do video as well as the audio recording. So when we do interviews, so we shoot the video of the particular songs, the various songs they do, and that'll go up on our website. Friday night's jam session, we did a 3-hour Facebook Live video production with 2 cameras and lower thirds, the whole bit. And it was a lot of fun. And according to the stats, the analytics, it was well accepted. Let's just say the numbers were quite high from the previous Friday at the same time. So it was good. It was a good experiment. It worked. So we like it.
Is that kind of web broadcast available to watch later, or was it live only?
We did it live only, and we took snippets for pieces on the website, so you can see pieces of it on the website. Yeah.
Okay. And just for our curiosity,
it was an experiment. It was an experiment to try and see if we could make it work and how much would go into it, so that moving forward, we can come up with a better plan to do this on a regular basis. And it paid off. It did exactly what we expected, so it was nice.
If listeners or viewers to this show want to see what you're talking about, what's the website?
Oh, you go to wbgo.org and just click on, I forget which pull down it is nowadays. There's a couple of different shows. You'll see it. We have the highlights and the pull down menus. We have different the checkout, Jazz Night in America. There's a few different pull downs. You'll find
so I'm curious about when a group comes in, and at your place it would typically be a jazz group. Do the musicians themselves have their own desires for which mic they want, or which one they make him and say, hey, my guitar really works well if you use a blah 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 mic, and how does that jibe with your own recording engineer's desires to use a given mic? How does that get worked out?
Oh, it's worked out very easily. We have a Sony console we use. It's a multi-track console, so it'll accept any microphone. We have we have preamps, Millennium preamps, API preamps, the True preamps. So they'll handle any microphone we put into them. We did have an artist here 2 weeks ago, and she travels with her own microphone. And
you mentioned this, yeah.
Yes, she's a vocalist from the UK. She now lives in Paris, and beautiful singer, unbelievable range, very. It was just amazing. I mean, to sit in the studio, recording and listening and hearing all the subtleties that you get from a vocalist, it was absolutely amazing. And the microphone, she says, I have my own microphone I prefer for my singing. I was like, all right, fine, we can work with that. And she pulls out an RCA 44, the big one.
Yeah, the big one, yeah.
The ribbon microphone. I mean, it looked like it was like for a split moment, I was like, wow, is this 1955? And am I in Studio City in LA? And do we have a boom this can go on? And in fact, I do. So I rolled out the boom for it, and we mounted it on a boom, and it looked like a scene out of a movie from the 50s. And she loved it. She's like, oh my goodness, I have never traveled anywhere where somebody pulled out a boom that this actually was a picture was taken with this in the catalog. I'm like, well, we're serious here. We enjoy doing this stuff. So it was great.
So, on the show, we love talking about microphones, and it's a passion of mine, even though I'm not well versed in lots of different mics. Of course, our guest last week, when you were not able to make it here, Chris, was John Holt, and he had a terrific selection of microphones, dating even history back to the 1870s, when the first microphones were made, before we had valves to amplify them. So it was okay, what do we do with it now? And then he brought us, up into the World War II era and just a little bit beyond. So we had a lot of links in the last week's show notes, including the RCA 44 microphone and the variants of that. So that was really interesting. But you mentioned something that just opened up a whole new can of worms a couple minutes ago. You said, I've been focusing on what kind of microphone to use. That's pretty critical. But then you said you've got all these different mic preamps. Whoa, how do you, I know you have people there who experience, but if you're talking to an engineer like me, what kind of advice would you give about I'm getting into this? What preamps do I need? Why not just use the preamps that are in the Sony console or whatever mixing console that you're using?
Well, in the case of the Sony console, the inputs are all line level inputs. So that's
well, that would do it.
Now, you mic preamps are a very sensitive subject. That's correct. The topic, there is no one answer that probably is correct under certain questioning. But I will tell you that you need to understand the art of audio, the physics, the sound. You have to know what distortion is and how it manifests itself in various ways. Take, for instance, if you are using the console that's behind me here, this BMX or the Radio Mixer 28, the mic preamps in here are very good. They're very, very high level capability, but they also have transformer inputs for isolation. And the transformers are important to understand how much ion ore there is in order for the low frequencies to pass cleanly or a square wave. So if you want to really test out your preamps, put a square wave into it and see if it comes out square at the other end. If it doesn't, then you have a problem. But that's getting really into the weeds and understanding the details. But preamps are important because that's what's going to translate what you're doing. And you just have to work with it. The preamps we have attenuators in the front of a dial. So you can attenuate by 20, 30 dB. There are times we go greater than that because of the instruments are really blasting. So you have a clarinet blowing into a condenser mic. The condenser mic can handle it, but the output is very high. You could probably draw a spark off the XLR connector because it's a lot of energy. But the preamps can handle it. That's all part of the chain of the audio, is understanding the microphone. Then you have the instrument itself, what type of wind instruments, string instruments, percussion. Everything has a particular place. So you can't just use an SM58 for everything, as some people do on stage. But it is preferred by many vocalists because it has a certain sound that is consistent because of the way they work the microphone. And we've had artists here. Matter of fact, was it last month, a couple months ago? They preferred a dynamic microphone. They asked the question, "Do you have a dynamic mic?" And they're like, "Yeah, we have that. We can do that." Oh, so they understood the difference in sound. They could hear it.
So I'm still relating a broadcast engineer's background. If I were called upon to go record a group, and for simplicity, we'll say an acoustic group, what would I need to have with me? And because I don't have the selection of mics that you guys have built up there at WBGO. I'm familiar with them. At least I know about the mics that you're talking about. Different mic preamps. Honestly, this seems really complicated and beyond the capability of an engineer like me. Maybe I'm looking for some advice on a middle ground. So let's say that a broadcast engineer with a typical production room or on-air room with with some vocal mics, maybe a bunch of EVRE20s, a group comes in. What's the best that I can do under those circumstances to make that group sound good on my radio station?
Okay, so you say a group comes in. So we'll assume, say you're a country music station, you're in Nashville, and you have a trio coming in, and they happen to be 2 guitars and a banjo, or maybe so let's say 2 guitars, acoustic, electric, and a banjo. So they come in, they say, "Hey, we want to play our latest hit or one of our classics," and have an interview with the presenter. So okay, fine. You put them into your studio. Now we'll say you don't have a dedicated talk studio. You just have an air studio and production facility. So you say, let's go into the air studio. We're going to go live to the radio. So here's what you do. You sit them in high chairs if they're comfortable using a high chair. You have a microphone that's for the standard talking, the spoken word part. Then you bring in a mic stand with another microphone. If you want an SM58, an RE20, or if anything you have. And you position it, if it's an acoustic guitar, you position near the opening, bring it back to either a mixer outside the room, right? You mix it outside the room and then bring it back into your console. Or you just bring it into your console. That's the part you'll have to decide what you have facilities for. And then the same is for if the electric guitar person, they typically will bring a small little amplifier, like a shoebox size amp. You just mic the amp. Now, sometimes you may say, well, do I mic it right on top of the grill, or do I mic? Rule of thumb, depending on how loud they play, you do a dry run. Ask them to play a few notes and say, hey, just play at the level you're going to play. Hit those strings. And you look at it. You look at the levels. You say, okay, you can back off a little bit. You don't want to go too far back because then you get room acoustics involved. So you maybe 6 inches from the speaker if you have to. That should be enough. And that you'll get by with that just fine. The idea is when you're doing a music interview in the case of a group coming in like you're talking about, the music has to it complements part of the spoken word portion of the interview. So you're not trying to create this, this huge concert hall effect on the radio. What you're trying to do is say, hey, I'm talking to the latest group, blah, 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 and here's what their latest hit's about. They're going to play a few strums, a few notes. People in the audience get it. They don't expect it to be on stage event. So you just want to make sure it translates clear enough. That's all. Somebody will yell at me and go, you're using an SM58 to mic that guitar in the studio? It's like, dude, it's an FM radio signal. It's an internet stream. The interview's about the fact they just cut a new album. It's the first one in 22 years. Trust me, no one's going to argue over the fact that didn't use a ribbon microphone on that guitar. What they will like to know is what they will like is they've heard something they enjoy, and they're going out and buying the CD or downloading the song. And that's the goal we're trying to achieve here. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're a facility that does high quality stuff, then that's a different question.
Okay. And your facility does stuff that is archived. It's kept around, I suppose, because it's good stuff.
Yes,
right?
Yes. We have a basement full of archives. We have 2 rooms full of archives on the floor, and there's a few other places we've got archives. Yeah, the facilities. This place has been going since 1979. There's a lot of stuff.
You've actually kind of with your latest advice there. You've given me a little bit of confidence, and I just brought to mind here in Nashville, of course, home of country music, but there's plenty of other music here too, and groups do come into radio stations. And I'm just thinking of my friends over at WRLT, Lightning 100, and they have a control room that honestly is really cramped. But they do have room for 2 or 3 or maybe 4 people if they leave the door open to come in there, and they have groups come in and play. And you know what? And they're just using whatever ordinary, they may be RE20s, but just whatever ordinary microphones that they would normally use for the morning show, voice talents. And they're mixing all this on an Axia console. They were the first people in town to have Axia gear 10 years ago. And you know what? Now that I think about it, I've seen video and heard them on the radio, and I've always been amazed at how good just that setup sounds. I think it's partly due to their standard FM audio processing. They're using one of our processors there, and I'm just amazed that this it is rocket science, but you can go a long ways with just standard radio techniques, I suppose.
Absolutely. An RE20 microphone, an SM7 microphone, the 2 popular microphones in most studios across the country, in the world actually, because I've been in Europe and I've seen many RE20s and SM7s, is a microphone that is capable of recreating the sound that you're miking. The difference between condensers and dynamics is the fact of how much air pressure could be moved across the element to recreate the sound. If you're doing a string instrument, odds are the dynamic mic you're running with and the proximity to the strings will capture all the subtleties you need for that broadcast interview. The same is true for percussion. The same would be true for even a wind instrument. Now, if this was a classical music format station that you're doing an interview at, and you have a cello, a violinist come in, they might be a little particular, or the subtleties of how they play the instrument might require a microphone a little more sensitive, and a preamp and a console that can handle that sudden transient spike. But if we're not talking that, we're talking the but average radio stations like country music, pop music, rock and roll, stuff that you're not expecting to do this every day, you have the equipment to do it with. Just use your imagination. Think. Just don't panic. Don't go like, oh my God, if you have a guitar, you have to mic it X, or your drum set has to be Y. In certain conditions, yes, but if you're just doing a quick interview, somebody rolls in, you can make it work. I mean, hey, I've done live interviews with groups in the studio with a pair of microphones in a standard XY for stereo, and just stuck it up 10 feet above the entire room, and just said, "Play, go at it." The microphones on the table were for the vocals, for vocal talking, and we just put the top, and then the music played when the instruments were playing. That's it. We went with it, and because the room was dead to begin with, it helped, and it worked. And again, who is the audience trying to reach? We're not looking. This is not Blue Note Records, Verve. We're talking an audience that enjoys the conversation, enjoys the fact their favorite musician is on the radio, and they're listening and they're engaged and participating. So you want to bring that across. That's what has to come across. The storytelling. The instruments, the music will come across just fine if the story is right. And that's what's important.
Sounds like even if you don't have specialized gear, keep your levels right. Don't overdrive your mics themselves or the mic preamps. Have good levels. Mix it together, and if this is not something that you do all the time, you're probably going to be fine. And then if you want to, if your facility, your radio station, your content creation, whatever it is that you do at your facility, if you're into the higher end stuff, as Chris's station is, as some stations are, then get these nuanced things and make it better. But as long as you're running a clean operation, you can get decent results with just the gear that you have.
Absolutely.
Okay. Hey, Chris, this has been informative. Okay, I this is the kind of thing I could talk about all day, and I would love to come sit in on one of your recording sessions. In fact, I'm going to be in New York in October, so maybe we can get together and go over to WBGO.
Sure.
That would be very cool. I was going to say, if all you can do is muster one microphone and a stand, check out the movie "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" and you'll see that it can work, because that's how they used to do it. When the vocalist, when it was time for the banjo picker to play, he would step right up and then when it's time for the guitar player to play, he'd come up and strum, and then when it was time for the vocalist, he would come right up there and vocalize. And you could do it all with one microphone. You can.
Well, remember, in those days, even today, they still do it. That's just reinforcement. You're in the room. You hear the instrument directly. That microphone's just there for a little reinforcement for the folks in the back of the room. Those up front, they hear it direct. That's the other equation you have to remember too.
All right, but in the movie "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" George Clooney used the big microphone as a great foil so that he didn't have to quite so exactly mouth the words to the song. You could see he'd start to mouth it, then he'd get up behind that microphone, and so there could be a tight camera shot on George Clooney, whatever his character was there, singing various country, bluegrass, folk songs, and he didn't have to be perfect with the mouth movements along with their pre-recorded song, because his mouth is hidden by the huge microphone. Hey, you're watching or listening to This Week in Radio Tech. Kirk Harnack and Chris Tobin here. We're chatting about the way we do things. And coming up next, we're going to talk about the way that we're going to be doing things. Maybe. I'm a little nervous about some of it, but that's my nature. And Chris is going to tell me I'm right to be nervous, or said, this is all going to work out. So stay tuned for that. Our show, This Week in Radio Tech, episode 355, is brought to you in part by my friends at Broadcast Supply Worldwide. Their website, bswusa.com. And I'd like you to check out their remote sale. That started at the beginning of July. It goes for 2 months. Do not let it pass you by. Don't let them run out of the stuff that you need for your upcoming sports seasons, for sales at stores, for car dealer remotes, all the things that you're going to have to get out and do, especially sports. They have some great things that are on sale. Now, here's the cool. The Comrex, the new Comrex NX codec, you can pre-order right now. It's shipping in August. They're taking pre-orders now, and if you pre-order it, you get a free Audio-Technica BPH S1 headset. Now, that's a value. You get that for free if you pre-order. Go to the website, bswusa.com, and click on their remote sale stuff, and you'll see that page right there that's on your screen if you're watching. They have portable PA packages. Hey, you got to do a live remote. You want to talk to the audience, and you need to do that to impress the people buying the remote broadcast. Well, Fender Passports with stands and carrying bags, that's the package that is available and on sale, so you ought to check that out. That whole Fender PA package. You can save up to 43% on that stuff, too. Lots of other remote packages available. Call BSW USA, talk about what you need, and they will put together a package for you. One of the things that's available is this, while supplies last only, a beautiful 4-channel field mixer from JK Audio. It is on sale. Now, these are B stock, which means you get full factory warranty, and it's almost like new. Maybe it went out to a remote, maybe it went out to a trade show, but these have full factory warranty B stock JK Audio remote mixers. The Advanced Pro headset from Sennheiser, the HMD27. Now, it has fabulous sound quality and a unique design for extra comfort. You get great isolation, so it's good for loud environments. When do those basketball games start? Oh, my goodness, that's a loud environment. So if you're calling a basketball game, you're down on the floor or even up in the stands, you need something to isolate the noise a little bit, and the Sennheiser HMD27 will absolutely do that. Also, the Audio-Technica BPH-S1 headset. You can get 3 of them for the price of 2. That's the sale price going on now at BSW. There's also this that we actually looked at this. I did last week. I was pleased to participate in a couple of SBE meetings, one in one in Kansas City and one in St. Louis, where they put me into the meeting using the HDV mixer. This is a really cool device. They have a sports video package, so your radio station can put video of the game on your website. So the social media interactions included. It runs on the included laptop computer to give you elbow room and tight press boxes. Check this thing out. They have a lot of different packages available, but they have the sports video package. You can watch the video if you go to the website, bsw.usa.com. Click on that and watch the video about how that works. There's also a processor on sale, the ultra-low latency Orban Optimod 5500i with analog and digital I/O, and a full-featured RBDS generator for data and metadata. It's all there. This is the remote sale going on now at bswusa.com. I got to remind you, they got their big warehouse right next to an airport with a UPS shipping facility. You order as late as 7 o'clock at night Eastern time, and if they have it in stock, they can get it out the door and on a plane to you in case you need it right away. But don't wait. Check it out, bswusa.com. Thanks a lot, Broadcast Supply Worldwide, for being a sponsor of This Week in Radio Tech. All right, Chris, I'd like to get to this other topic here. I'm curious about this. Where did I put my notes? Good golly, I've spent a lot of time making. Here we go. So we've had sponsors, and if you go to a trade show, you'll see that more and more functions of a radio station that used to be done with dedicated hardware are now being done on a PC, or for 10 years now, if not more, we've seen broadcast gear that has PC motherboards inside of it. And usually that works out okay. Sometimes we go, because it reminds us of things like Windows and blue screens of death, even though usually the stuff just runs fine. I want to talk about this. Using PCs to do. So I'll just bring up a few points, Chris, and then we can chat about them. PC motherboards, as I said, have crept into broadcast gear. That's been 10 years ago or more that started happening. The operating systems often have been hidden away from us. Now, a lot of times it's Linux, but there have been Windows operating systems, behind stuff, and there still are. Is that good or bad? Does that make us scared? Are there ways to run Windows that's extremely reliable? The answer is yes, but it makes us a little nervous. PCs run automation software 24/7. Can a PC be your main on-the-air audio processor? And plenty of people are using alternative software processors like Breakaway, Stereo Tool. There's a new product from Omnia, the first one that you buy and you run on a PC, called Omnia SST. Can a PC be your STL? Are there benefits of doing that? Maybe just cost, instead of doing it with a piece of dedicated STL hardware, whether it be a dedicated codec or something like I've used, an Axia X node. And can a PC be your talk show system? Can it be a mixer? Can it be codecs in there all simultaneously? Is all of this a good idea? And, in the long run, I think it is, and I think it's inevitable. Question for me is timing. So, Chris, maybe you could give us some of your thoughts on these things. And eventually, I'd like to make sure we talk about your main FM audio processor, or AM, running on a PC. In fact, my long-term plan is to run 4 radio stations worth of processing on a PC, maybe a server platform, maybe some ultra good reliable hardware, and then I'm going to use micro MPX for a low bit rate STL to the transmitter site, and I've got to run a PC there to decode all that stuff and feed it to my FM exciter. So I've talked enough. How about your thoughts about this, Chris?
Well, let's see. Let's the first answer. Hell no. No, I'm only kidding. Well, first, let's see. If you're a radio station that's downlinking one of your favorite radio network program shows, have you ever looked in the back of that satellite receiver? Have you noticed what it looks like?
Yeah.
That's right. It's a PC in a box. So, it's not impossible to do. You can. I've done it, and I'm going to say I'll see more of it. You want to run processing on your PC? Absolutely. I would suggest a server class PC approach. Make sure you have dual power supplies. Make sure there's nothing else on that machine except the operating system and your processing software. Nothing else. Turn off all the updating features. Put together a regular schedule of when you'll take it offline to update the OS to make sure everything stays current. That kind of thing. What else? You can do it if you want to do an STL and have it PC based. Again, look at it from a standpoint of 5.9's reliability, uptime, so it's server class, or in the days of telephone, carrier class. So it's server class computers. If you do that and put in a certain amount of preventive maintenance and just don't do default settings, you should be able to make it work. There's no reason why you can't. Now, some people say operating systems, well, Windows is pathetic. Okay, that's an opinion. Many share, many don't share, whatever. Windows CE is another one. Then there's VxWorks. Oh, never heard of that, have you? Well, that's a real-time operating system that's used by a lot of equipment manufacturers. There's also the real-time application Linux kernel that's used in the Axia system. It's also used in many other products. And when I say real-time application interface, the RTAI, it's an operating system that's designed to work with elements of timing, processes, CPU threads that require timing that's critical. What would be more critical than your STL, than your automation? These are things to consider and look at. If you want to just run Windows 10 and that's it, okay, but you better make sure it's focused on one thing, and that is your STL or your audio processing or your automation. Remember, computers were designed to do multiple things, but not in a mission-critical environment. That's why you spend many thousands of dollars for your audio processing that goes in the rack that does one thing: process the audio. Okay? Reliably, 24/7, 365. There's a lot of things we've taken for granted in the new age of do-it-yourself stuff, and cheap is better. I could use examples. There's many examples that can be used, and the pros and cons, the pitfalls of going one way or another. As you mentioned, using a computer for a mixing console or doing codecs. Digigram has the DigiBlue, I think they call it. It's a totally cloud-based talk show mixing appliance operation, and it uses WebRTC, AES-67. You can do everything from a computer and mix a complete talk show from your bedroom in your house, while the elements of that show are scattered across the globe. So Digigram looked at it and said, hey, we make hardware, we could also do this. Why not try this approach? You could make a hybrid approach where you do part of the cloud and part of hardware being a codec at some facility that you connect to remotely through the cloud. And back at your studios, you have everything virtually on a computer. Virtual servers, virtual PCs we talked about a couple of episodes back is an approach you can use. And if you build it properly, you can make it work very reliably. I think what we need to remember in the industry as broadcast engineers, broadcast IT people, or BITS, broadcast IT services, build your system for what you expect. Don't just pull it off the shelf. Commercial off-the-shelf services, coats. Just don't grab it, throw it in, and go, hey, that's it. It's going to work just fine. It's a Dell. It's a Dell X, Y, and Z. It'll be perfect. It's an HP. It's a Compaq. It's a Cray. It will be good. No, you can't do that because computers are not self-aware. And if you do have one that's self-aware, leave the room immediately. But anyway, you have to program. You have to program it and design the system accordingly, just like we did 20, 30 years ago when we were building transmitters or, studios. You just didn't, add water to a box and boop, there it is. It's a studio or it's a transmitter room. You built it. You built it with a certain goal in mind. Do the same thing with the PC-based approach. Have a goal in mind and find a path to get to it. And don't be afraid to say we need to do preventive maintenance. It's important. It's an electronic device. It needs to be checked on. It's got moving parts like fans. The parts do get hot. The average PC, like the one behind me, generates 450, 500 watts of heat. That's when it's running the video processing to crunch and render a video file. Picture that 24/7, 365. You need to take that kind of thing into account. Is the airflow proper? Is the room temperature going to be stable? All the things you take for granted because most of the other appliances are designed to do one thing. And we'll say in the case of one of our advertisers, an Omnia product, it's designed to be on all the time. So heat or thermal conditioning is built into the design. You need to think the same way. You want to build a server. Servers have a certain noise level because they have to pass a certain amount of air across those circuits. Make sure you're aware of that. Don't put your server class STL box in the studio or in a control or in a room that people occupy on a regular basis. Now, there's a few things that you have to consider, but I think, and Kirk, I agree with you. It's definitely timing. It's inevitable. It's a good thing. It's not something we should be saying, this is just not going to work. It only works if you apply yourself to it. That's the way it would be. I mean, hey, you buy an Omnia Volt out of the box, you throw it in the rack. Do you not pick a preset, or do you just assume what's factory default will work? No, you sit and tweak it. So do the same thing with your STL PC or a codec PC or production or automation. Tweak it. Make sure it's what you want, so you can sleep nights.
We've seen the when Windows 10 came out, and even before that, we've seen the disasters on air on TV stations, typically during the weather. Because as a former TV weathercaster myself, we depend entirely on computers. And the biggest system I ever used was 9 computers altogether, most of them Linux, but they were doing all the ingest and rendering, while the Windows computers were the ones that the weathercasters used to put together their rundown and their graphics. Anyway, but we've seen those disasters when Windows 10 would pop up, and yeah, we're quick to blame. Look, Windows 10 is a just like all the Windows operating systems are general purpose operating systems, and so you've got to massage them to be for your purpose. Now, so that said, and if we're going to use PCs for what has traditionally been dedicated hardware. Indeed, we've got to understand and learn about and know how to massage Windows or whatever the OS is into behaving the way we want. Typically, we want it just to not be there. We want our application all the time, whether it's running as a service or as an app. We just want it there all the time. And by the way, that's a good point. Does it run as a service or an app? And I'm not a coder myself, but I get to be in meetings with coders at the Telos Alliance. And so one thing that I find really interesting is that we have several coders who they really work on making critical functions into Windows services when we have things that need to run on Windows. And typically at the moment, this is our streaming applications. So that I'm trying to think if there's any that don't. No, I think they all do. If a broadcaster gets streaming software or streaming hardware from Telos, that's all under the ZipStream brand name. These run as services in Windows, which apparently tends to be more reliable than an application that runs. Then you can still do things wrong. I get that, but running as a service is a pretty good thing. And so I've got a number of computers running streaming, and with very rare exception, they just sit there and work and work and work and work and work. And of course, the user interface to these is typically a web browser. So you browse into the service, and you can see, do all your manipulation there, and then you close the browser, and the service continues to run using the instructions that you told it to. Then there are some other products, and again, I'm familiar with stuff from the company I work for. I got to realize there's other stuff out there, probably people doing some very clever things. But for example, with the Omnia audio processors that are designed by Leif Claesson, Leif has, for a long time eschewed connecting to his processors with a web browser because the performance wasn't there to look at the things that he wants to be able to look at remotely, and figures that you, the customer, do too. So there is a separate app that you run anywhere you want. You can access it remotely or they're on site, called NF Remote. And the presentation made by NF Remote is strikingly amazing. And you get full, if the bandwidth supports it, you get absolutely full quality audio, including the whole multiplex stream, so you can examine the whole multiplex. But Leif Clayson's products run on a PC motherboard. And what's also interesting is within the Telos Alliance, and again, that's my reference point. I'm not leaving anybody else out on purpose. There are audio processors that still run in DSP cores. And then there's audio processors that run typically with Linux running underneath, and so it's all being done in the Linux operating system. And then there are others that run in a Windows operating system that's extremely stripped down, nothing in there that doesn't have to be in there, and they literally run for years without stopping. So in a way, and we're already using PCs to run as appliance functions. So that's been pretty successful. In fact, by some measures, it's been extremely successful. I guess the little bit of a scary part is, instead of having the manufacturer strip and build and install the operating system exactly right in the way that they know will work, we're now looking at taking applications and running them on general purpose PCs where the operating system may be default, or, as you were saying, Chris, we better tweak it. And hopefully manufacturers will come out with, hey, if you want to run this audio processor or this phone system or whatever it is on a PC, go through, if it's Windows 10, go through and turn this off, turn this off, turn this off, turn this on, turn this off, turn this off. And I'd love to follow manufacturers' recommendations for how to tweak the OS. I haven't seen any of that yet, but at least with specificity. Chris, maybe you could comment on that, having the manufacturer tell you how to tweak the OS for the best operation over time.
I've found that, let me see, maybe it's changing, but many occasions, most manufacturers do not offer any suggestions along those lines because they do not want to be perceived as providing support for the software companies. I've had discussions with manufacturers about this, and some of the representatives, the manufacturers' reps, and they say, well, we don't write the code, so we can't explain. I said, well, here's how I see it. You're using that product, that OS, in your product, and I'm using your product. So I'm expecting you to tell me that, yes, we have tested and we have a good idea of what's going to happen, what shouldn't happen. If you can't do that, or you're not willing to support those questions I'm going to give you, me personally, and this is just me personally, not anywhere I've been or any of my folks I work with, I will tell that representative, I'm not buying your product, or I'm returning it, because I do not. It's like buying a car, and the car manufacturer says, well, we don't make that particular alternator or the battery for it, so we can't really tell you why it did what it did, so you'll have to contact them. I'm like, yeah, really? That's I'm not going to buy the car. I'm not going to go back and recommend you. It's like, that's how it works. And I think manufacturers have to start doing that, because I've run into a lot of folks where I say, hey, I'm running your product. It's on a PC. It's running this particular OS. And I'm noticing a quirkiness and an error message I can't seem to find anywhere when I research it. And I've had many occasions where the support people are like, well, we don't support that. We don't know anything about that. All we know is that if you run it this way, it should work. And I've had that happen on many occasions. I'm like, wow, that's not good. So that's the one thing I would like to see change. Other than that, you can make PCs do a lot of stuff. You just got to focus and tweak them. I mean, I've heard today somebody had a PC running since 1997, running a logging software, and they just decommissioned it, I think, this week.
Wow.
So there is some substance or some truth to the fact that you can make this happen. I can tell you that for a period of 1 year, almost 1.5 years, I had a PC running a particular sound file that was accessed every day and used for a radio station until we replaced it with a solid-state playback device, because we just didn't have it at the time. And nobody was the wiser. And when I took it out of the rack, they looked at me like, is that what we've been using for the last year and a half? I was like, yeah, how about that? I did strip it down. There was nothing on that machine except the OS and the sound file and a program that played it in a loop. And the audio came out of the card, and that was all it did. And it didn't do anything else. And it worked for completely a year and a half, nonstop. I never had it even booted.
Wow.
And then I worked at a network where we had a PC that used to send out the Q tones for network automation. And that PC was an IBM XT. Yes, the beige box with the little grill front. That ran for a long time. Did just what it was supposed to do. Sent out little chirps. That was the NetQs, the 32 Ts for the network.
Wow.
And it worked like it should. But again, it was tweaked. And the guy who developed it and software designer was smart about it. And he's now at NPR doing their software development. And I know who he is, and he's a very good guy. And because if you focus on what it is you're trying to accomplish, you can make the boxes do it. If you understand what's going on, you got to be willing to do a little homework. So these are the things I've learned from developers over the years. And trust me, I have been in project teams where if you knew the stuff we used and where we found it and how critical it was being applied, you would have probably shot us on sight. But it worked. But see, the group of us would look at it and go, okay, so this is a PC, and the motherboard is this, and here's what it does. Okay, what if we do this, this, and this? Okay, let's try it. Did we have a few explosions or pops of capacitors or CPU chips that burned up because they overheated? Sure. Overclocking, I guess you'll use the term. But from that, we were able to garnish, garner. That's why it did that. That's why they did it this way. That's why Microsoft or Mac or Linux, or at the time SCO Unix, that's why they did it that way. Once we understood that, we started cranking out stuff and making things happen. And boy, let me tell you, we had a lot of Unix boxes that were doing things you'd swear it was an application-specific device, and it was. So move fast forward to today, you can do it. You can definitely do it.
I think we're going to move into some pretty exciting times if we as engineers are willing to really understand PCs, that platform, and the nuances of the OSs. I think we're looking at some amazing, cost savings, some amazing frustration, but also learning curves. But in the end, getting systems that work really well, are more flexible than they've ever been before, in a way more replaceable and more serviceable than they have been before. But there's learning curve, and they're smart. And I think we're going to have plenty to talk about over the coming years as this migration to an entire PC facility, except for the mics and speakers, takes place. Hey, Chris, we've got to take a quick break and then leave room for a tip at the end of the show. You're listening or watching to This Week in Radio Tech with Kirk Harnack and Chris Tobin. It's our 355th episode. We've been talking about how we do things and a little bit about what's coming up. So I'm enjoying this conversation with Chris, and I always look forward to dreaming a little bit and then seeing what comes about because of it, or in spite of it. Our show is brought to you in part by my friends at Lavo, L-A-W-O, Lavo.com. And if you go to their website, and I wish you would, please use our special little tag there. It's lavo.com/TWiRT. That'll take you right to the Radio On Air page. And yes, they are counting. So, go take a look at that. Lavo.com/TWiRT. And it'll show you the line of equipment that Lavo has for radio specifically. Now, Lavo's a big company. They do big consoles for all kinds of stuff, television and live events, opera houses, stadiums, just all kinds of performance venues, the Olympics. But they also have a huge line of equipment and software for broadcasters, radio broadcasters. If you are the CBC in Canada, the BBC, or NPR, you've got Lavo gear in your place. They have radio consoles, virtual radio systems. Now, that's a little bit of what Chris and I have been talking about. Routing systems, whole virtual radio systems. It's this product line called Relay, and that's pretty exciting. Where Lavo is working on putting mixing, auto mixing, phone system, codecs, even automation, all in the same computer. And certainly the same interface, Relay. We're going to be talking more about that in the coming weeks. The new Ruby console, the whole new way of thinking about radio workflow, and the Ruby Visual Radio Console. They just brought that out at the last NAB show. By the way, if you're going to IBC in Amsterdam, you'll want to be sure and visit the Lavo booth there and see what's new. But for now, you can go to the website that's specifically for us folks in radio, Lavo, L-A-W-O, lavo.com/TWiRT, T-W-I-R-T, and see what they have for radio on air. And this whole subject that Chris and I have been talking about, I didn't design the subject around Lavo, but I really believe this is where the world is going. And Lavo is certainly a big part of that, with plans and thinking and execution that is in line with this notion of we're going not only in the cloud to do things, but locally, when your stuff is local, when your PCs, when your equipment's local, we're going to be doing a lot on what are PC platforms. Now, you may never deal with the underlying operating system, or you may, but these PCs will be dedicated to doing these jobs that we do in radio that currently are done by a myriad of other pieces of equipment. I think it's interesting, and I really believe that in the long run, this is going to be amazing and reliable and good. But it's good to have people like Lavo at the forefront of making this happen. Really cool. Check it out, lavo.com/TWiRT. Thanks, Lavo, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. We really appreciate it. All right, Chris, can you leave us with a tip of the week?
Well, I can, but before I do that, prior to our spot, our sponsor, when you were talking about things moving with PCs and all the traditional stuff, those of you watching and listening to this program, this is being produced on a software-based video switching system and a software-based audio system with faders on it. So just keep that in mind. That's what we've been doing for the last couple of years. So yes, it's very possible to do this stuff. Do it very well, but it takes some planning. So the guys at GFQ did have to do some planning, and I can assure you there have been some late nights and craziness going on, but it works. It's working very well. So the tip this week would be, well, we're talking about microphones and studio stuff, things of that nature. If you are if you are expected to have groups coming in or interviews with musicians and things of that sort, make sure you have the right test equipment. What do I mean by test equipment? Well, cable testers. How many times you put something together and all of a sudden it's like, oh, why is this microphone not working? Well, maybe if you had a quick cable test, you can check to see if pin 2 is open or pin 1 is open, and then what the problem could be, rather than panicking, or keep an extra set of cables in a box. But it's handy to have these test equipment around, because you will find that on many occasions you'll say, oh yeah, we'll put that aside, mark it, it's got to be fixed. It never gets done. It winds up back in the pile, and all of a sudden the next event, you pull out the same cable with the same problem. So get your simple little testers from the various places. They're real cheap and easy to use, and very quick solutions to problems that will crop up before you know it and when you don't want it to.
Cool. Cable testers. You know what? Last week, I spent part of the week in Mississippi, and we were putting together a new studio, and I had my $9 Cat 5 cable tester. I think you could buy them for $6 from some of these Chinese aggregator places. But I had my $9 cable tester, the kind that you put it, you clip it in at the far end and clip it in at the near end, and gives you your lights to see if all your connections are made. And we had to use that to figure out what in the Sam Hill the previous installer had done with these various Cat 5 cables going through the office suite. So we had rented a new office suite. We were installing the manager's office and the sales office and the control production room computer, and we had a bunch of wires show up back in the kitchen area. And that's where we put the rack. And I'll tell you, without a cable tester, we kind of used it like a sniffer. Without a cable tester, we wouldn't have had anything. We wouldn't have found this stuff. And we also found out that Kirk Harnack did a bad RJ45 crimp. I got two wires like under the same pin and no wire where it should have been. So yeah, cable testers real important. Would have saved us a lot of trouble and testing and running around like chickens with their head cut off. Cable tester, good idea. And my favorite at the moment, is because we use so much Cat 5, is a Cat 5 cable tester. But those XLR and RCA and things like that, those cable testers are important too. Chris, thanks for being with us this week. Next week, we've got Sam Wallington from Educational Media Foundation talking about more drones and looking at towers close up with them. What do you think about that?
I like it. Drones are fun. I was on a tower recently, and a friend of mine had the drone up taking pictures of us. It was fun listening to the thing whirling around. I'm like, oh, that's what it's like to have a camera in the sky looking at you. Good thing there was no, wasn't weaponized. It was just simply a camera.
Drones, well, for our 4th of July, we were on a rooftop, thanks to your inspiration, and we saw a drone flying around, and I got to believe it was law enforcement. And it wasn't a quadcopter. It was an airplane-style drone. It had wings. We couldn't tell how far away it was or how big it was. I got to believe it was probably a 6 to 12-foot wingspan. And it was, the lighting on it was marked a little bit like an aircraft, but it was missing a tail light, a rear-facing light. But it had wingtip lights, red and green, and then it had flashing white lights on those wingtips as well. And it sounded like a little 2-stroke motor, like a chainsaw motor, but muffled. So, and I guess the benefit of an aircraft design is probably staying up longer. So. Interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
Guaranteed law enforcement. Well, that's
right.
Where it goes.
We got to go. Thanks to Telos for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech, as well as bswusa.com and lavo.com/TWiRT. We got to go. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye, everybody.